and you should all get that message.
Thank you.
You all hear me?
Yes, Brooke.
Yes, you're a little
Faint.
soft, but I can hear you.
Yeah.
Can you see me? Because I'm not seeing myself.
We
No,
cannot
can't
see you.
Okay,
We just see your photo, your circular photo.
I'm gonna sign off and sign back in.
Okay. 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 Brooke's returned. Still can't see her though. Brooke, can you hear us? Oh,
Can
she's gone
hear
again.
You. I can
Oh.
hear you, but I still can't see myself.
Yeah, and we can hear you, but very faintly.
Try it another time.
Okay. Well, Brooke tries to sort out her technical issues. I will call the meeting to order. This is a meeting of the Land Use Review Board. It is 1:01 on July 27th, 2026. I am the chair, Janet Hurley. I will ask other board members to introduce themselves. Alex,
Alex Weinhagen, good afternoon.
Sarah,
Sarah Had, good afternoon.
Kirsten,
Kirsten, hi everyone.
and Brooke is trying to get back on camera for us. Here she is. Brooke, can you introduce yourself?
Brooke Dingledine, I am here. I'm not certain why my video is not working.
We do hear you a little better now too, a little louder. So Brooke
For some
Dingledine
reason-
is here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but for some reason my video camera is not showing anything. So I am present.
Okay, thank you. Agenda updates. Sarah?
I would move to add an item as the first action of business this afternoon for 1 VSA section 312D4A to commission expense claim guidance, updates to forms and guidance. Perhaps
Sarah?
this could be something.
I don't know if it was true for everyone else, but your audio sort of bleeped in and out for a minute, so it wasn't clear what you were saying. Can you start over?
Sure, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I would move to amend the agenda to add commission expense claim guidance and form revisions.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second,
Thank you, Alex. All those board members in favor of amending the agenda, please say aye. Aye?
Can I ask a question? Oh, I guess
Sure.
we'll get to I. We'll discuss it.
aye.
Okay,
I.
yes. And Brooke?
Aye.
Thank you. That was 5 of us, so that's unanimous. So we can discuss that now, Kirsten. We're gonna put it as the first item of business quickly.
Just as a
Kirsten?
point of order,
Oh.
first, do we also need to amend the agenda to add minutes?
No, because those were not posted, the 15th. Yeah, they were not posted until this morning. So we can't do that till next meeting. So can we go to Kirsten on the question she had?
Yeah, so the agenda item concerning the expense forms, is that really the mileage reimbursement and not the form as a whole.
It's just for the mileage
Yeah.
reimbursement to put in the new rate. Yes,
Right. Yep.
so,
Just clarifying my understanding of what we're talking about.
yeah. So Sarah, go ahead.
So since we're on to the agenda item, I would like to make a motion to update the commission expense claim guidance and any necessary forms to reflect the new GSA mileage reimbursement.
Thank you.
Second,
Thank you, Alex. Any further discussion from board members? Kirsten,
I would like to make this a blanket that our guidance reflect the ongoing, GSA rate fluctuations, that we wouldn't have to do this with every such occurrence, that it just happens by default with respect to mileage. I see no reason why we wouldn't do that moving forward.
yeah, I'm not sure.
Avoid having to go through this each time.
Right, I'm not sure that we can resolve that right here. For now, we're just gonna update the guidance, but maybe that's policy. I don't know. I don't know. Sarah, was your hand up?
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a great idea. However, I think maybe we want to get consultation and a chance to talk with our staff first around that, because it shifts the onus onto our staff to be able to provide those updates as they occur, and this is more of a public facing entity. So I think great idea, but for today, just to make sure that we don't have our employees lose access to this new updated rate, is perhaps we can move forward with the motion as I suggested.
That's fine with me. I see
Hi,
Pete.
Brooke, we can see you now.
Thank you, Alex, for sending me messages on how to fix it.
Okay, so any further discussion from anyone on this item? Okay, with that, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Sarah, I didn't hear you.
Aye.
Okay, that is unanimous. Okay, we have opportunity for public comments on non-agenda items. Is there any present who wishes to comment on things not on our agenda? Okay, it appears maybe not. Let's move on to the next item, approval of the July 21st minutes. Sarah?
I'll make a motion to approve as revised.
Okay, thank you.
second,
Thank you, Alex. Any further discussion on the minutes of the 21st? That was our meeting that got canceled on the 20th and had because of a power outage, and we held it the next day. Brooke?
I'm sorry, but I did not have an opportunity, given the other workload that I was focused on this weekend, to review those. So I would not be able to vote on them because I just can't verify the accuracy of them. So I apologize.
Well, we have a motion, and it's been seconded. Unless we want somebody to retract that motion, are we okay to approve those, understanding that Brooke hasn't reviewed them yet?
I'll move to call to question as a roll call vote.
Okay, any further discussion?
I'm fine with waiting to approve these at the next meeting.
So am I.
I would appreciate that because I think it is really important that we accurately indicate our meetings. There are a lot of folks that are concerned about our conversations, and I would feel more comfortable if we had that opportunity. So again, I apologize, but if folks would be willing to wait till next Monday, I would appreciate it.
Sarah.
I'll retract the motion.
Okay,
I would ask though, on our website, there is, it still shows there's the agenda of the 20th, and perhaps we could have an asterisk or something of that nature. I think we did have the headline saying that it was moved to the 21st, but it might be good in the meantime to just have that correction up for people that are looking for that meeting. Under agendas.
oh, got you. Okay. All right. So motion retracted. Let's move on to the next item. Bennington County Regional Commission pre-application response questions. I see Nick is here from BCRC and Sam in the background.
Hello. We will have Rob Giotti from Dorset joining us momentarily. But in any case, we sent you guys a memo with some updated information, and we wanted to have an opportunity to see if that information was sufficient. So on 2 items in Dorset and in Arlington.
So in
We could talk about Arlington first, since we're waiting for a representative from Dorset.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, just I think he should join from the waiting room any minute now. Yeah, do you want to start with Arlington?
Yeah. So we sent.
Wait, hold on just a second, Nick. Sarah.
Sorry.
So I, just as the lead on this for Bennington, just a little bit of lead in on this is, so we reviewed the Bennington pre-application response, and similar to other RPCs that have been through the pre-application before, as they're preparing to move in with their application, we've had them come and ask some clarifying questions, because we'll say things of the nature of we need more information, or we have concerns that this might not be this, it should be that. There are 2 areas, and there's a memo submitted, which is available on our website with that. I can share screens with that, but I think Nick and Sam, it would be helpful as we walk through these things if we were able to take a look at some of the visuals that you submitted within that memo. I don't know if you might be able to share some of that so we could look at the maps.
I can share the
Or I
screen,
can.
Sarah.
Well,
Yeah,
either one. I just,
yeah.
if they
I'll
need to
share
be made a
this.
presenter, I'm happy to do that, because right now I don't think that they are a presenter, and so I just wanted to navigate that first.
Yeah,
So
I was thinking that it might make sense to have one of us do this so that we can compare the memo map to the pre-application on our viewer for people, so they can see what changed, at least in Dorset. But
and Nick, I did change it so that you're now a presenter too.
Awesome. I will share my
and
screen.
Kirsten,
And then the final thing that I'm going to say
Oh, sorry.
before I serve you is, because we have both Nick and Sam together in one spot for transcription purposes, we're going to need you to identify yourself and just say it's Nick or Sam before each one of you speak. So sorry about that, but thank you.
okay, Kirsten.
So just quickly, as the board knows, due to workload issues, we've divvied up some of the regional plan assignments, et cetera, and I'm no longer assigned to Bennington. So what I'm going to do is just go off camera and be ready to rejoin the board's meeting when this discussion concludes. If for some reason you really need me, bring me back in, but have a good discussion.
Thank you, Kirsten. Brooke.
And I am recused from this matter, so I will also be going offline during this discussion.
Okay, thank you. See you in a little bit. Okay, let's turn it over to Nick. Looks like Rob has joined us too from Dorset, so either order is fine.
Okay. Let's do the work in Dorset first. and that since we have Rob here, and this part is less scrolling. So you guys asked for more information regarding South Dorset Village Center, and then one of the suggestions that came out of that request for more information what included language or comments from the Fish and Wildlife Department regarding rare and threatened species in the area. So we prepared a revised village center boundary and we also supplied some information on long-running planning process in the South Dorset Center area. So as you can see on my screen, the boundary has been revised downhill, coming from the top of the mountain to the northeast to the river on the southwest. And the previous boundary was substantially further uphill than where our current proposed boundary is. Sam prepared that boundary, so she can speak to that a little bit more if you have questions on that. But Sam can explain her logic a little bit.
Yeah, this is Samantha Page speaking. We had an exchange with Rob, the town manager, who can speak to the town's planning efforts more specifically. And he shared some updated conceptual planning that the town has been working on for this site along Raptor Lane that is owned by the town of Dorset. And that conceptual planning helped us further refine the area of the village center that really the town expects to be developed into more mixed use village center in the coming years. And so this updated boundary reflects those new or an evolution of the planning efforts, and it also reflects some of the species that were identified in master planning and that Fish and Wildlife raised questions about. So those are sort of the evolution of the area and kind of a more refined village center boundary proposal for South Dorset. We really wanted Rob to be here because he can speak in much greater detail to the many, many years of planning that the town of Dorset has been doing around this part of town. And so I'd love, when it's appropriate, to give Rob a chance to speak to some of the work that the select board, planning commission, and other committees have been doing in Dorset.
So, I'm just gonna quickly. Oh, there's an echo. Can you all hear me all right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm just gonna quickly share the screen and show the former proposed boundary. Is that showing?
Yes.
It is.
And so basically there's a little bit of a squirrely line down here instead of all the way to the straight line that you had previously, right?
Precisely.
Yeah, and some of that is due to maybe some rare species occurrences. Is that what those little green dots may be? Let me see. Yeah. Yeah. Is that what the Department of Fish and Wildlife
They
expressed
I
concern
think
about, or is
they
it newer data?
No, I think there were some, let me find the exact language. They found that the parcel that the town owns, which is pretty substantial in size, contains high quality rare fen wetlands, bear habitat, and rare state listed plant species. And so those really are sort of in the northeastern parts of the parcel. And I think this new boundary reflects a more focused area. It's sort of south of a buffered stream. I think that accounts for sort of the squirrely boundary that you noted.
Okay, yeah.
And also reflects some of the more focused planning that the town has been doing regarding a future of some housing on that site.
And,
So you
and that
paired this in
answer
review with
to
those.
my question was provided by Samantha Page.
Yes.
Go
thank
ahead,
you.
Nick.
Yeah, and I'll note that some of that those maps were pulled and informed by the maps that were linked in the upper part of this before we supplied the map. So
So, and maybe we can let Rob speak to the planning. And Rob, I guess I would like you to address whether this is reflected in the town plan. And I saw an article in the Manchester Journal over the weekend that there's a large survey that you're conducting and wondering when that would be complete and whether it might be complete before Bennington County Regional Commission submits its final plan. But I guess I'm just wondering how much support there is from the town citizenry.
I'll back up and talk about the ownership. The lower portion of the property at Raptor Lane and Owl's Head was acquired in 2018. The lower portion's about 300 acres. The upper portion is the town forest that was expanded back in like 2012 or 2013. So the ownership of the lower portion actually, I think our plan, our latest plan was approved shortly after the acquisition. So the acquisition kind of happened, as the latest plan was almost put to bed. So it was a new parcel that the town had owned. So that's why if it, doesn't show up in the town plan currently, that's why we didn't have ownership of it. After we purchased it, we've gone through 3 or 4 iterations of kind of public input, environmental review, a lot of other stuff. The reason that Fish and Wildlife knows about the bear habitat and some of the other sensitive pieces is we had VHB do an environmental study that pointed to all that stuff, trying to be the town's perspective, trying to be good stewards of what it is we were owning. And over time, what's happened is there's been expansion of recreational use on part of the property, more adjacent to the town forest. I'm sitting in a building that we built over here. And then the kind of latest discussion point around use has been related to housing. And that survey that's out right now, Janet, it's another week or 2 before we have all the data back, but we're getting pretty good data, and it's pointing us in the direction of kind of probably lower unit counts than what initially was talked about at the town or the regional level, at least on a maybe an initial phase. And it looks like we are going to be headed to some kind of a public question in November to kind of test the waters as to, here's shall the voters authorize the conveyance of up to 30 acres of town-owned land to support the development of up to 35 housing units. So it's kind of targeted and smaller. And in that same vein, that's the map that Sam and Nick had put together, is kind of including some of that info. And we can share additional conceptual site plans and stuff like that if you want or need.
Yeah, I don't think we'll need site plans. That's helpful. Thank you, Rob. Sarah, go ahead.
So on I think it was page 22 of our pre-application response. We requested additional information to determine whether or not the South Dorset Village appears to meet the statutory standards for a village center. And I think what we were looking mostly for was what's required under the future land use methodology and process under planning considerations. So thank you. I think that the refined boundary is helpful, as well as some more information about municipal support for this. The last bullet point under the guidance is protecting natural resources may be included in the FLU area, and the regional plan should note that those resources may be present. They'll need to be field verified during the development review process, consistent with municipal and state requirements. So I think that's the one piece in the information that's been submitted, that since Rob has joined us, it might be helpful to have him speak to how the RPC municipality will look to coordinate that moving forward as the town starts to move to a more specific development project, it sounds like.
I mean, I can, the data that we have is field verified. So we've had, you know, with specific to the plants, state botanist has been down here, field verified locations, which has allowed us to incorporate that into the planning process. And some of the stuff that I can share would show that, where those areas are, and essentially the planned developed areas, you know, being restricted to be away from that.
Alex?
I just want to make sure our conversation moves away from the Fish and Wildlife issues and that particular boundary line, which I think, you know, that was an advisory recommendation. And based on what we talked about, it seems like you're doing good work to refine that. But the real substance of the pre-application response was whether designating this as a village center from a future land use perspective was appropriate, given where the community was on this issue and the planning, because it doesn't appear to be reflected in the town plan, and we like to look at the town plan to say, like, that's the guiding vision for the community, and this is a new idea. And so my question the whole time has been, this seems like a good idea. It seems like the town is doing work to formalize it, but is placing it on the regional future land use map right now, cart before the horse, or is it actually, you know, proper given the community conversations to date? And Rob, I'm not quite clear on what you feel on that front. Like, is your community solidly behind this and the town plan is just lagging a little bit, or is this still being discussed? And yeah.
Yeah, general sense is the planning commission community behind it, and we just haven't codified it in the plan yet because the plan isn't due to be updated quite yet.
Sarah?
So I think it's always great when you can have something in the municipal plan, because it speaks very clearly to what the municipality's intent is and what they want to see. Just an interesting facet that I just want to bring up for the sake of conversation is village centers. You do not actually need to have an approved and confirmed plan to have a village center. So it's not a requirement that a village center need be codified within the town plan. However, it's, as I said, it sure is handy, and especially given some of the requirements about if you are going to have protected natural features, how you're going to deal with it. That's why I sort of came out from that standpoint. So I just wanted to very clearly say you can't have a village center without even a confirmed plan. However, it's very handy, that sort of information that we're always looking for. It's where can we go and find it? And so I think that's why this conversation is helpful today.
Before I go to Sam and Nick, can I just follow up on what Sarah just said? Yes, you don't have to have a plan, but a village center has a descriptor in statute that needs to be met. And if the current configuration of that area does not look like what is described for a village center. I think we do need to see planning work that shows that the town envisions that it will be. So let's go to Sam and Nick.
This is Samantha. Yeah, I guess I wanted to add that I think the town has done a lot of planning work towards creating more of a civic center and mixed use center in South Dorset. And I think the brand new town office that Rob is sitting in is a big representation of that. The town allocated funding to build a new office and move it from East Dorset to South Dorset. And so there have been public conversations in Dorset for many years about investing in that part of town. And I think the housing development has been a big conversation, and the town is continuing to have that public discussion about what the right approach to developing housing in that area is. But that's just one part of, I think, a longer conversation where there has been a lot of public buy-in to making that part of Dorset feel like even more of a place than it has been in the past.
Thank you, Sam. Any other questions, Alex or Sarah? Do you feel that you have on this additional information that was provided? Do you feel like it addresses the concerns expressed in the pre-application, Sarah?
I think it helps. I think I'd like to see as part of the final, what I reiterated about more explanation about the development review process. And in looking at a town plan amendment or update can be a lengthy process. And it's not necessarily required, but I think to the points that Janet and Alex made, your development review regulations can articulate more of what the community has agreed to and how they're going to regulate this. I think one of the specific things in taking a look at our methodologies that we're looking at is how you're going to plan for particularly the natural features of that area. So that might be something as you move forward with your final application to articulate, and if the community has any bylaws specifically that you've gone through the adoption process, public facing forward, that articulate what this is going to be, how it's going to be regulated, and get to, I think, what Jenna articulated in terms of filling in a little bit more of the detail. How this is going to be a village center, not just a residential subdivision. I think that could help bridge the gap. I think I still, as a board member, have some concerns about the gap. And just to say, there's a lot of great planning work going on. Sometimes the municipalities are out ahead of their plans and the RPC plans, and this will all eventually be caught up. And if it's not right for being a village center at this time, it could be a transition area and could be a future amendment too. So just some different options. I think we tried to articulate those in the pre-application response. But I don't think I'm squarely in the camp of this as a village center based upon the additional information submitted.
I feel similarly, Sarah. It sounds to me like a slightly higher than 1 unit per acre housing development is being proposed next to a new town office, but I don't know what else, that would make it feel like a village center is being conceptualized. So if, insofar as you can provide additional information that might fill in that vision, that would be helpful for me. Alex, do you have any final thoughts?
Just ditto, you two said it. I'm feeling the same way. Like I feel like there needs to be a little bit more in order to call it to call it out as a village center at this point. It's definitely looking like it wants to be a new town center, a new village center. But I would echo Sarah's comment that if the easier option, to be perfectly honest, for the region and the town through the regional plan adoption is to give it a different designation, perhaps transition infill, and come back, whether that's a year or two later, and do a minor amendment to turn it into village center once the planning is gelled, the community surveying information is back, or the town plan has been amended, or regulations have been put together. So yeah, pretty much in the same place as the other two board members.
Right. Thank you. Rob, do you have any questions or before we move on to Arlington?
No, I don't think so. Thanks for the time.
Okay, thank you for coming.
Mhm.
So, Sam and Nick, if you want to move on south.
Yeah, let's, I will share my screen again to, there we go, to walk through the proposed, support or the extra information requested on this Water Streets neighborhood, as I'll refer to it. The village area that is west of the Batten Kill in Arlington along Route 313 West. So I shared our map, which includes our current sidewalk network map, and the future land use areas of the edge of the village to the east and the village center at issue, or village area at issue, to the west. So I shared a series of photos here, just kind of walking you through the infrastructure as we proceed east to west. It does use a lot of different treatments to get to service our pedestrian service in this neighborhood, but this neighborhood does have a pedestrian connection that has existed for about 40 years. We don't really have full information on exactly when this was all implemented, but about 40 years in various flavors. But the important piece being that the sidewalks that I'll scroll to right here along the two bridges that connect the village center with this village area. These are structure number 6 and 5 respectively, and noting the wider shoulders on both sides of the road across the bridge that carry you to this town-owned Yellow Barn property to the right. That is a conservation site, and then continuing further to the west with a widened shoulder that, while I could not find the minutes of where we talked about this at the Arlington Select Board, that the town does plow up to Batten Kill Lane. So there is a year-round pedestrian connection, at least for half to 3/4 of the corridor, with wider walkable shoulders or side areas beyond that. Noting that there is a meaningful westbound pedestrian load in this corridor that seeks to reach River Road to the southwest of this area. So not all the pedestrian load here is about connection in the center, it is about connection from the center to the west as well. But yes, there are sidewalks on the bridges, widened shoulders through part of this, that exhibit what is clearly a deliberate attempt by both VTrans and the town to connect this very dense, very ancient neighborhood that grew up around having town water about 100 years ago, and is a neighborhood that has existed in some form or another in Arlington for fully 200 years. So it is a neighborhood that has been walkable, does have some infrastructure, but are there any questions on the nature of this infrastructure, or whether there is a need to pare back the village area in any way, based on the lack of infrastructure in any particular area? So.
Well, let's go with Alex first.
Okay.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, Nick, you've convinced me. This was helpful information. It feels like a reasonable area to have, village area, given the history of it, but also given the relatively short distance. My initial concern was that the distance for a pedestrian, for it to be within walking distance was sort of on the margins, but that it's along a state highway, and state highways tend to be higher speed, higher traffic volume, and therefore less safe for a pedestrian to walk. But I believe the speed limit along this section of 313 is 35, so it functions much more like a village road as opposed to a high-speed state highway thoroughfare. So that, together with all the evidence you presented, convinces me that it's okay as a village area. My actual follow-up question, which maybe we talked about earlier and I just forgot, is why is there rural general on the south side of the highway? Like, why isn't it all village area if most of it on the north side is village area?
So,
Yeah, and
Um,
I'll
okay.
just follow up on that, Nick, sorry.
you know,
At the least, if you want some of that to be village area, why not call the whole road, I'm sorry, rural general, why not call the road at least itself? It's a developed feature and call it village area. Map it as village area, even if you want some of that other stuff south, the parcels to the south to be in the rural
Yeah.
general for some reason, which I can't remember either why. You had an explanation for that and I can't recall what it is.
So I'll note that in our final submission, that rural general area will all become a transition area. All that rural general is based along a river corridor contour. So the areas that are not, and I'll actually go back to sharing just to pull up the future land use map.
Actually, I can show that
Oh, perfect.
real quick
That'd be
here.
great. But
Just get-
yeah,
Okay,
Yeah,
are you
so
seeing that? So
Yeah,
I turned on, didn't turn on river corridor, but as soon as I do, you'll see that it corresponds to your boundary right there. So,
yeah, so
you can include river corridor in village area as long as it's infill.
and we thought about that. But I was also having a bit of hesitancy of mapping village area on that area immediately to at least those couple of parcels immediately to the south of the bridge, which flooded very heavily during Hurricane Irene. Are areas that we are hesitant to include in village area, but the idea of calling like having a general rule, calling that contour a transition area is what we're leaning toward right now per the other recommendation on that. But like keeping these areas that we know are not floodable, that have some backlots, that have some infill potential in here, that have some ongoing studies on wastewater and things like that, is certainly helpful to me. But generally, yeah, there is the idea of mapping the roadbed village area is a really appealing one. So that's certainly something that we could consider as part of our final draft, and then just keeping these portions of parcels in the village or in what is now built rural general, which would be transition, to just indicate that they're less buildable in the river corridor.
Right, got it. Sarah.
So while you have the map up, it would be great if, and I don't know if Nick can do this with Janet sharing the map, the yellow barn that you noted where the sidewalk ends. Is that
Yep.
where the cursor
here.
is right now?
Correct. Yeah, that's the parcel map rural conservation, because it has conservation easements from VHCB.
Okay, so that is helpful, and I think what I'd like to sort of recognize in looking at the map is, although I think where our pre-application response was looking at that rural general and bifurcating the village area from the village center, I think it's very helpful that if you take a look at that green area, and we've seen this in other regions too, where you have a conserved parcel, you know, the yellow barn is on a conserved parcel. So you not just only have flood hazard, but it's a conserved parcel in the middle of a village center or a village area, oftentimes shows up as this rural conservation. We've seen parks, within village centers that show up as that. So there's a sidewalk throughout that conservation area that actually does then reach the village area to the village center. So that's very helpful for me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Nick and Samantha, and I see Bill is there too. Hi, Bill.
Can I just
Um,
raise one more question, Janet? This is
Yes, you may.
We just had a clarifying question at the end of the pre-application materials. When it refers to tier 1B status request, this is on page 35 of the pre-application response. When referring to Arlington, it just calls out East Arlington, but the request was for both Arlington Village Center in the west and the East Arlington Village Center. And just wanted to get some clarification on that.
I think if we thought that it was not ripe for tier 1B, we would have explicitly said so, and that was probably just an oversight. Sarah, do you
Okay.
recall?
So I was
Any
just
issues
looking,
with-
and if you're on
Yeah.
page 21 of the pre-application response under village centers, we found that the Arlington Village Center does meet the statutory standards. So I believe that was just an oversight, and now with Act 152, which does not require that you go through the pre-application process for a tier 1B, that I think makes it so that even with that oversight, with that, a correction's not needed because we don't have to pass judgment on pre-application on tier 1B, but that was an oversight on our part.
Thank you.
Okay, just want to make
Thank you,
sure.
Ben.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for being here, y'all.
Thank you.
We now have Keisha Ram Hinsdale, Senator Ram Hinsdale, and Carla Raimundi from the Civil Rights and Environmental Justice Unit within ANR with us to have a conversation about the Land Use Review Board and the Environmental Justice Law. And Senator, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Thank you so much, Chair Hurley and members of the Land Use Review Board for having me, and Director Raimundi for hopefully what will be a fruitful and generative discussion, which I know you guys don't always get to have. So I think Janet struggled a little bit with my title, which makes sense because I've worn a lot of hats in this effort, and that's sort of how I come to you all today. I think the most useful role for me to mention, in addition to being a senator and chair of the Senate Economic Development Committee at the time that we passed Act 181, is also teaching environmental policy and environmental justice in various institutions in the state: Vermont Law and Graduate School, the University of Vermont Grossman School of Business MBA program, and in the fall I will start teaching in the school I graduated from, the Rubenstein School of Natural Resources at the University of Vermont, co-teaching environmental policy. Those roles have really intersected with consulting with the state in some paid fora, as well as traveling the state, talking about our environmental justice laws and policies and what Vermonters would like to see out of those. So I think for many citizen legislators, it's hard for us not to, feel like our paths sometimes collide. But those have, in general, I think, been in alignment. And so to complement Director Raimundi, I hope to offer just some of the past and how I think it informs the present. And hopefully it's empowering for all of you, because I think that, when you are the first of a new reconstituted board and you've had an extremely ambitious charge, it just helps to be able to think anew about what you all are trying to accomplish, the tools you have at your disposal, and some of the underlying principles that I think are still relevant. Janet, you look like you wanted to say something, but I will turn
We're
to
just
some
nodding
notes.
along.
Oh, good.
Go
I will
ahead.
turn to some notes that I co-created with Director Raimundi and with Janet, just so we were really using your time well, your sensitive and limited time well. And with that said, I think it's fruitful, maybe as I do my work going forward, for whoever wants to listen to me, to do some kind of environmental justice timeline in Vermont. My passion and career has been in what does environmental injustice look like in rural places. And I started that work in Vermont in 2006. And at the time, that's now 20 years ago. And at the time that I started that work, there were only a few online resources to point to that had the words environmental justice and Vermont sort of in the same sentence or in the same document. The first couple were grants to some of our rural communities related to Superfund sites. And then there were some grants to some of our communities related to mobile home park livability. And those EPA grants were specifically environmental justice grants around 1999 and 2000. So that's a flavor of the kinds of communities around asbestos mines or having sewage backup issues in their mobile home parks that I have been trying to track over a long period of time. And I say all of that because I think there are those, and I'm saying this, as a senator and as a scholar in this area, but I think there are those who would look at the backlash or the uprising or whatever you want to call it against Act 181 as a failure on anyone's part, on the legislature's part, on your part, et cetera. But I actually see it as a tremendous success, and really the kind of environmental justice coalition that I had imagined would need to come together in order to have their needs met, their voices heard, in a way that meets people's economic well-being as well as their environmental well-being. So I still, to this day, look at the Facebook group, talk to people within the group that now calls themselves Rural Vermont Rising. People have told me there's AI images of me on there, and that I've been name checked in some of those conversations, not in a pleasant way. But really, to me, that is what an environmental justice coalition would and should look like in Vermont. It is easy to try and, minimize that or marginalize that by seeing some political leanings of certain folks. But all of the conversation themes that I've seen in that group are, we don't feel like we have political power. We feel like decisions are made about us without us. We feel like if you have enough money, you can get through this process. And we are suffering from the trauma of many past environmental experiences that have not been redressed. Climate change, flooding, crop loss. So we have really vulnerable populations who have been very isolated. They don't have the opportunity to build a movement very easily or build political power easily. And now they have found each other. They have found a way to talk to each other. And as concerning as that might be to certain other stakeholders in this conversation, that's what environmental justice looks like, is people finding each other and figuring out how to use their voice collectively for their well-being and their community's well-being. So I have been watching that with great interest. And I think that is absolutely a group that's full of stakeholders for our engagement work moving forward. I'm going to turn to the notes that we co-created. I did just want to say that as clearly as I could. As I was looking back at an environmental justice timeline for the state, I think, prominently the Federal Highway Act of 1956, that's when a lot of people say Vermonters started to band together to figure out what future development and infrastructure looked like for them. And at the core of that was farmers, right? People who didn't want to see their land use change or have highways bisect their land. Many would still call it progress, and it did come to pass, but that we can look back further at Indigenous history and the presence of Black Vermonters. I don't want to ignore race here, but when it comes to the conversation about pollution, poverty, and political power, right before the upheaval of urban renewal, you saw Vermonters just starting to realize they had common interests in how to use their land and use their political power to conserve their land. So that was me saying that I think a lot has gone well in this process so far. I know you don't hear that very often, and you may not even feel that way, but putting things on paper, putting things out to folks, and being willing to be wrong is kind of the name of the game right now. And it's how we're going to need to move forward very iteratively in community. Environmental justice is not a check box, as you know, it's a ongoing process where community feels more and more empowered while recognizing that there are voices outside of the community, or unheard voices like nature itself, or homeless individuals, or people who have not yet moved to the state that also have desires around our land use. So I don't have to go through some of what actually happened, but I think again, I'd underscore we have a new land use review board, new environmental justice responsibilities that came in 2022, new mapping, and you're not the only ones being asked to do mapping, as you probably know painfully well. So how communities experience the layers of mapping that the state is attempting to do. You all are planners, right? If Vermont had more and better statewide planning apparatus, this might also go better. So making budgetary requests, I think that help create more of a clearinghouse for all of our mapping efforts is something I would welcome. Because I think legislators continually repeat that we feel like we look at 8 maps, every time we're trying to pass a piece of legislation, and they don't talk to each other. And I know that if you are going to be able to do your work well, that is something that needs to be better resourced. Although we have a great GIS group of folks. These engagement expectations are newer for you all. Now, like, you had your shoulder to the grindstone trying to just do the maps scientifically well or with the best information you had, and now you're being asked to engage with the community through different groups. And I've given your chair some idea of organizations and folks that have done this work for Vermont, would be able to jump in. I've been a part of some of those organizations, many I have not. So, it just, everyone has maybe taken a turn. As you know, it's not easy, and you sometimes don't make it all the way through the process without people criticizing your engagement work. So I try to hold I have no one who pays me now, but I just have a particular interest in making sure that the groups who have done the work still are able to carry that knowledge forward, because a lot of it is community knowledge, and people get really exhausted trying to repeat, what they've said in the past. I've told Janet my best antidote to that is to compensate people directly for their participation. It is expertise that people have, regular community members, the people who show up at your meetings, and they often participate at a financial loss to themselves. They have to pay for the gas to get there. They have to figure out a meal on the go. They might need to get childcare. So as open and flexible as you try to make the input you receive, there are folks who could really use cash in their hand to participate, particularly post-pandemic. Okay. So I guess the other thing I really wanted to emphasize is that I have never wanted to dissolve Act 250. And I think we continually talk about this fight over Act 250. And I hope as we approach the next legislative session, we instead have a conversation about returning to its fundamental principles, which I think we've just gotten really far away from, frankly, with all of the layers of permitting and appeals and processes we've added on top of it. But, sometimes when you take out, when you're sculpting something and you return to, its original form, these were always principles that I think do still stand the test of time. Number one, compact village settlements. I've said before, and I'll say again, compact village settlement doesn't mean exclusive. It doesn't mean a price only certain people can afford. It means that you do try to build densely and figure out places where the land use is no longer in question and appeals cannot be made based on land use itself to achieve that density. So you have walkable, dynamic village centers close to people's employment and schools and healthcare. Great principle. The second part of that principle is compact village settlements surrounded by working lands. I think you saw part of this major uprising just coming from folks who feel like they want to keep their lands working. They want to be able to have that continued something that's a resource, both that makes them proud of their heritage and is something they can pass on to their kids. And even if we find additional ways to compensate folks for conservation or for light use agriculture, things like that, they do deserve to be compensated for that. Otherwise, these are lands that were intended to be working and put to use and provide income for people. So I think we started to hear when we were talking about alternatives to Tier 3 and the road rule, that these are areas where we'd have to compensate people, especially for thinking about what they are foregoing with the income and economic value their land can produce. And finally, somewhere along the way, I think by a governor, it was said that Act 250 should be about making decisions and having these conversations on your front porch, not in your parlor or on your back porch, but with your neighbors where everyone can participate. Somehow that turned into all the way to the Supreme Court twice, and if you have the deeper pockets or a good attorney, being able to continue appealing not only on Act 250, but on multiple layers of permits that each have their own set of appeals. And I think that is where you received the most backlash to anybody falling under Act 250, is that we only measure the projects that get into appeal. We are not as good at measuring the projects that never happen because people were afraid of losing a lot of value and not ever getting their project completed. Or something that went from 70 units along a transportation corridor to 10 single family homes. So I think, we can work at that intersection, and I would encourage you all to be brave and to see yourself as in many ways, I was going to get in trouble with somebody, but co-equal to the legislature in making this work. I think you all have already done a good job, and it's time well spent figuring out where you have flexibility and where you have some ironclad commitment to do right by some legislation or some legislator. But you are doing an impossible task. I don't think anybody, I personally, as the bill was being written, felt like this was much more than we could ask, anyone who was in any way part-time or understaffed or, not given significant resources and significant time. So we constantly have agencies in government tell us they need more time for something that was far more ambitious on paper than it would be simple to roll out in reality. And so I would just really encourage you to find partners in the legislature where you can say, we could try and achieve this, but if we do, here are the ramifications of that. And maybe you did try some of those things, but you certainly have that right. And I'm happy to be one of those folks that helps you make it pretty clear that you are being heard saying this is not going to work, or if we put this map out, that will set us back rather than take us forward in terms of people who want to feel heard and feel like that is not something then that they felt like was coming, or they might have ended up feeling blindsided by. So what the rest really gets into discussion on my end, and I think Director Raimundi wanted to refine some of those discussion questions. I hope it's not just repetitive to say some of these things out loud on the record, but really gives you just the knowledge that you have partners in the legislature and in academia and elsewhere, not just naysayers and overseers. This is not a nearly impossible task when you take it as a whole. And the only way to sort of move it forward is to keep acknowledging that and to keep limiting expectations as the discussions take place with all the regions. But then, really asking the right questions so that Vermonters feel heard and validated in the process.
So Senator, do you want to use that as a transition into Director Raimundi's? Carla, are you there somewhere? I don't see you. Oh, I see CKR. Okay. Okay. But that I think understanding our commitments under the EJ law and how Carla's unit at ANR can help us as a covered agency get there. And Carla has some great questions that will help us understand the sort of parameters of a framework that we may need to develop here. So Carla, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair Hurley, for the invitation, and Senator Ram Hinsdale for thinking of me to join you in this conversation, and to the board and other members I see here of our community. My name is Carla Raimundi. I am the Director of Civil Rights and Environmental Justice Unit for the Agency of Natural Resources. And just really briefly for background, our agency, the Agency of Natural Resources, is tasked in statute with providing technical assistance for the implementation of the environmental justice law to the Advisory Council, which is comprised of 10 members of historically underserved, marginalized communities and 10 covered agencies, plus the Office of Racial Equity. The Office of Racial Equity has 2 seats, one within the Advisory Council and one within the Interagency Committee. Why is this important, and something that I call out as I discuss the environmental justice law is because the EJ law established this infrastructure where government connects with communities all throughout the process of the implementation of the EJ law. And so this lets us know right away that there's an important conversation that needs to occur at the same time that we're having conversations about implementation of policy, development of processes, and consultation processes as well. So let's transition the conversation briefly. Thank you so much, Senator Ram Hinsdale, for the reflection on the history of Act 250, EJ, and some of the lessons learned through Act 181. I am also of the opinion that this is a fantastic opportunity for the board to reflect about the future and perhaps consider embedding EJ even further. I know you've been doing an incredible work at centering environmental justice and the EJ law, specifically as you review the Regional Planning Commission's submissions. But I will make the case for centering EJ in 3 different areas of conversation. The first one is community engagement, not a surprise to anyone. The second one is an evaluation framework, and this is the framework that Chair Hurley referenced earlier. And the third one is collaboration and technical assistance. So when I had the conversation with the senator and Chair Hurley, I was thinking about doing a kind of engagement, and then it became evident right away that what I had envisioned was not necessarily what would be best served by this conversation. So then I started thinking about, we know what happened, we know where we are, so where are we going, right, as an entity? What's up now that we've gone through the processes that the senator outlined? So the purpose then for me with this conversation alongside you all is to begin identifying the foundational questions that will shape the board's approach to community engagement, evaluation, and collaboration. Again, this is an offer, and the idea is that later on in the conversation, we can explore these spaces. So one of the themes throughout today's discussion has been partnership. And so as I've listened to Chair Hurley describe the board's responsibilities in those pre-meeting conversations, it struck me that the next chapter for environmental justice for the board is not simply about how RPCs carry out their responsibilities under the statute, but also about the land use review board approaches themselves, its own responsibilities under Act 181 and beyond. So to me, this is where EJ, environmental justice, moves from something we reflect on historically to becoming a lens for action, helping guide how the board approaches community engagement, decision-making, and collaboration. And policy building also sits at the core of your functions. So then the foundational question for me became, and I'm going to read it because I don't want to guess if I did it right or not. So the question that I came up with was, how should the Land Use Review Board carry out its environmental justice responsibilities in a manner that is transparent, consistent, collaborative, and equitable? Again, I will repeat the question. How should the Land Use Review Board carry out its environmental justice responsibilities in a manner that is transparent, consistent, collaborative, and equitable? And I would like to underscore that community engagement practices and outreach practices benefit greatly from transparency and consistency. And so one of the questions I asked Chair Hurley in preparation for this conversation that we're having today, well, right now it's kind of a monologue, but hopefully it'll turn into a conversation pretty soon, was, so Chair, what's the framework that the board utilizes to carry out its responsibilities, the myriad of responsibilities? In the context of that conversation, we were specifically talking about the review of the Regional Planning Commission's plan. And the response was TBD. And this should be a topic of conversation, right? And so I immediately thought about, okay, well, if what's at the center is this dialectic conversation with communities, about communities, and in the process, the board is charged with the immense task of deciding whether regional planning commissions have performed the plan, the map as per EJ values and consistent to the EJ law, then we should explore what that means for the board, right? So that we can start collectively thinking about standards that could be stood up and employed comprehensively across the evaluation of all of the maps. So let's start with community engagement. So community engagement, as you all know, is foundational to EJ. And before discussing how the board evaluates the work of others, I think it may be important to consider first how the board approaches engagement in its own work. So this question is not necessarily about how you would go about implementing a particular requirement or a particular task, but rather how is it that the board itself as an entity approaches engagement in the work across the board that it performs. And so some discussion questions that I thought would be helpful to reflect on are, what has the board learned about the community engagement from implementation of Act 181? Chair Hurley shared some of those learning lessons, and those should be captured. And I know they have been. And then the next step would be, so based on those learning lessons, what does meaningful public participation look like in the board's own work, internal to the board, so that when it is holding itself accountable to its own understanding of meaningful public participation, when it's reviewing whether others have actually engaged in meaningful public participation, they have their own, you have your own set of standards to compare against or to improve on. But that allows you to start thinking critically about meaningful participation processes. And not only thinking about the steps, sort of like in a sequential chronological order, but more systemically about what outputs do we want to see as part of meaningful public participation. Then another question that becomes important is, how can the board ensure that people with different experiences of Act 181 have meaningful opportunities to be heard? And so that actually forces the board to think about internal structures to capture differing sentiments and opinions and positionality with regards to the board's functions. And ultimately, I think there's an important question about confidence. And so the question that came to mind was, what practices can help build confidence that community input is meaningfully considered and informs the board's decisions? And I think this question is really important because I am of the opinion that, and as a public servant who works with the public and centers public input in their work, I know that even to the best of our abilities, there will always be folks who disagree with the approach. And so the level of conviction and confidence that the board has with its own ways and values and standards of engaging meaningfully the public are actually the things that will situate you different with regards to the conversations that you're having with the public. If you have a high level of confidence in your ability to engage meaningfully, then those conversations are going to reflect that confidence level. So as the board thinks about how it engages communities, the next question becomes how those principles translate to the board's review responsibilities, right? Like we talked about lessons learned, capturing those lessons, coming up with ways in which the voices of those who disagree with 181 and outputs of the process, how could those be meaningfully folded into the conversation? And so then the next question is, so now the board needs to review plans and come up with decisions about whether the plans follow or not certain requirements that the board itself is looking to stand up. So you're doing the work while you're building the work. And that is so extremely difficult. And I think something that the senator mentioned that we should all practice more is recognizing that challenge and difficulty, right? Sometimes state entities are seen as the entities that have the answers for everything. And we are also part of the unfolding of the environmental justice movement and the organization that's happening in Vermont. So to the extent that we can fold ourselves into that part of the conversation, I think the more truth to process we are. We don't have all of the answers. Actually, we're building concepts and answers for ourselves as we're working alongside you, community members, to come up with answers that are satisfactory to you. So then the board's role is not only to conduct the Regional Planning Commission's analysis, but rather it is to determine whether regional planning commissions have adequately considered environmental benefits and burdens and meaningful public participation when developing regional plans and future land use maps. That is a big, big task, specifically when taken in the context of we're also working to build that for ourselves. Like we are coming up with that infrastructure as we're doing the work that we've been asked to do within a certain very limited amount of time, which is also a barrier that should be considered. So what decision is the board ultimately making when reviewing regional plans? So that is a question that is not intended to be answered by like statutory quoting, but rather is about future focus, is what is ultimately being reviewed and what are some of the consequences of the review, and contextualizing that review within the scope of meaningful public participation and the barriers that exist internally to get to that place into the future. What constitutes an adequate environmental benefits and burden analysis? These are questions that are being currently analyzed and reviewed. And I understand from the conversation that I had with Chair Janet, which is
You can say that. You can
sounds
just say
sounds really
Janet.
nice. It sounds really nice to me. Chair Hurley, the response is the statute, right? Like we hold ourselves accountable to the statute and we're following the statute, but the statute does not establish standards for review processes. It communicates to folks what constitutes or what should be considered in a burden analysis, what qualifies as a burden, but the threshold, the review process, the rigorosity, what sources need to be reviewed. In the alternative, if this is a deficient source, then these are other sources that should be considered to ensure that the plans actually reflect the reality on the ground in Vermont. So these are all critical questions that should be analyzed in the context of the reality here in Vermont. And then there are other significant questions too that should be thought about, not necessarily just about process, but also in terms of defensibility of the decision of the board. right? And that goes back to the conviction, to the confident level, to the level of confidence. And what I really appreciate is that Chair Hurley mentioned that, you know, the board holds itself accountable to its values of equity and transparency and engagement. And I know, Alex, you and I met very early on in the process, and when you shared the incredible task ahead of you with regards to tier 3, I was amazed at the immense task. So collaboration and technical assistance, this is the last of the 3 areas where I think EJ has in itself like a core component of action driven questions and formulations that we could all serve to analyze and respond to. So environmental justice has always been collaborative, right? From the beginning, when it started and organized itself as a reaction to injustices that people of color, Black folks, were experiencing in communities, there was a looking to others who could support the claims. And so as a collaborative enterprise, after it became this organizing movement and movement to exact change, and it became an academic enterprise that now is embedded in government action, the question then can be expanded to informing policy and technical assistance, and what collaboration actually means, internal to your board and also externally. And so some of the questions are like, where can technical assistance help support the board's work? And this is a question that I am very interested in hearing responses to, because as the entity that's responsible for providing technical assistance to the covered agencies in implementing the EJ law, this really sits at the core of one of the biggest interests of the Civil Rights and Environmental Justice Unit within ANR. And so how can the board, CREJU, which is lovingly how I call our unit, Civil Rights Environmental Justice Unit, CREJU, the regional planning commissions, and the other folks who remain after the process that we've gone through, and other cover agencies, how can we all work together to promote consistency across government while recognizing each organization's unique role? And I think this is particularly important when we are regularly talking about trust and building trust. Building trust happens, yes, one agency at a time, but the skepticism and the context in which most of our historically marginalized, underserved communities have grown is in the context of a government that is not responsive. So it's not only the board, it's also the Department of Health, it's also the Agency of Natural Resources, it's all of us together, right? Like sometimes when I have conversations with members of the public, is the government, and we are all the government. So thinking about systemically how the government can better align itself to provide consistent products around engagement, around policy development, around rule making, around review processes that center equity. So that's my time. I have more questions for the discussion portion, but I would like to close out by saying that really my intent today was to start posing questions that may move us from where we've been, where we are, to where we're going, and really recognize that what's before us is great opportunity. It's great challenge, but I also believe strongly that there's great opportunity in building something that reflects larger portions of our communities in Vermont. So thank you so much. And I'm going to pass it on to Chair Hurley and I think Senator Ram Hinsdale.
Thank you, Carla and Senator Hinsdale. So, you know, Carla posed some questions for the board, and she also recognized that we are building as we are flying. And so we are like looking at Regional Planning Commission product and saying, you haven't done this or you have, before we've done that for ourselves. And the EJ law requires us to do this for ourselves, at least in a preliminary way, by developing a community engagement plan by July 1st next year. And Carla's unit in particular can provide us with technical assistance in that, and has, there's a subgroup that's worked on guidance for covered agencies to develop these community engagement plans. And I think that the unit will work with us in partnership as we do that. But one of the things that I pointed out in our pre-meeting discussions was that, you know, we have these guidelines for the way that we are reviewing regional plans. And we developed them early on because we had to start receiving these applications. And as we have moved through the process that was set up by Act 181, we felt, you know, we need to put some standards in there around flood hazard areas, around what it means to be a center. And I think it's clear that we probably need to put some standards in there eventually when we get the time to do so, around what it means to do these environmental justice focused populations analyses as they're described for the regional planning commissions in statute, and how we can make a determination of what meaningful engagement is. And we're sort of doing this by the seat of our pants. And I think that we are, you know, doing the best we can right now. And I think we are being responsive to Vermonters. You know, one thing that this board has done is we meet regularly, very regularly, at least weekly. And sometimes we have 3 public meetings a week. And we are, you know, trying to move our meetings around the state as we do these regional plans reviews. We are going to the regions and doing site visits and public meetings about them. And, you know, so we are, you know, we are working under some standards in terms of community engagement around this regional plan process that we were tasked with developing and then approving 11 plans by the end of this year for. But we also, in time, I think, need to do our own benefits and burdens analysis for the Act 250 program, you know, in its 56-year history. Is there a way to look at how the Act 250 program has influenced our statewide landscape in ways that have resulted in differential benefits and burdens? So I think that's part of what we need to develop as we look at developing a community engagement plan. But do other board members have some thoughts to share at this point? Alex.
Yeah, I'm thinking about 2 questions. Maybe now is not the right time to try to get the answers, but just to put them out there, especially to you, Carla. So first is sort of general. as a former municipal planner, to me, community engagement and ensuring that people have a opportunity for meaningful participation requires conversation and dialogue. Like that's how, that was my bread and butter as a municipal planner, was actually talking to people in a way that made them feel comfortable so that they could talk back and we could have dialogue. And I'm it's more difficult at the statewide level when there's more than 600,000 people to talk to, as opposed to 5,000 people in a small town. And I struggle with how our board and our agency, for lack of a better word, can do that work at that statewide level and make it such that people feel like they have opportunity for that meaningful participation. So I'm curious, like, what suggestions you might have for how different types of methods that we could use to reach such a broad audience. And my second sort of follow-up question is, the Agency of Natural Resources is somewhat similar to our agency in that it's part of its job is to issue permits, which is at the core what the Land Use Review Board does as well. And I wonder how the different departments within the Agency of Natural Resources that do issue permits are tackling that same question of community engagement and ensuring meaningful participation when at least the permitting side of what they do is very scripted. And I feel like, I don't know about ANR, but I feel like this agency does a very good job within the context of an Act 250 permit in making sure that, interested parties and abutters are notified and are listened to, and processes are explained to them in ways that they can understand. But I think our task goes way beyond that in terms of the need to do community engagement, beyond just how do you service somebody who's next to a project getting a permit. And I'm curious how ANR is doing that, DEC with their permitting. How are they doing that wider engagement outside of the permit context?
You may also be in development of doing that, Alex. And, as a covered agency, but I'll let Carla field that if she feels that she has more of an answer.
Yeah, my answer includes your answer, and I really appreciate, Alex, your first question. I mean, I like the second one, but the second one, my response is going to be is good. We follow requirements and we do a good job at that. We engage frequently, as you can imagine. And there's a desire from the agency to engage differently, to have better outputs. And so what that looks like really varies per programs at our agency. But I'm going to go back to that answer because that actually is a great segue into the guidance document that the subgroup of the Vermont Environmental Justice Law is putting together. And I want to address the first question, which has to do with state level engagement and just the number of participants. And also dispel the somewhat embedded assumption that community is a monolith. It's like community engagement sentiment. If we engage early, everyone's going to be more satisfied. Yes, and there will also be folks whom that is not sufficient or would need different kinds of engagement in an earlier phase. So I think for the state level question, what I believe has become a realization as part of the doing and the creation of the guidance that the Vermont Environmental Justice Law subgroup for the creation of the guidance is that this effort really transcends independent agencies. the effort around community engagement and really connecting with members of communities is a broader task than one agency can fully fulfill. And why I am saying this is there is a community of practice at the state level, and it's become evident for that group as well. And as we gather feedback from the communities that we engage, that there are so many engagements taking place that are very similar to each other by different entities at the same time, same communities. And so that is seen and perceived and dealt with as an inefficiency from government. As I am having the same conversation again, and it's really not going anywhere. So there is an organizing at the central level that is occurring through the community of practice in the creation of a community engagement tool. And this tool will be released, I forget the day, I believe it's August 30th. And the idea is that this will be a tool that will allow different state entities to connect with each other, to concert around engagements that are occurring in the state. So Alex, the response may not be satisfactory in terms of, well, you know, what we should continue doing as independent agencies is just ensuring that we're connecting early with the public in a very honest way, communicating barriers to the engagement. In other words, what things we cannot do with the input that you provide, what things we can do with the input that you provide, getting the input and then responding to the communities. Closing the loop is fundamental. So continuing doing that in a way that is consistent across the entity. And so this actually brings me to your second question about what is ANR doing. We are working on that. We are, as we are organizing ourselves to create our community engagement plan under the EJ law, we are very intentionally having conversations about centralizing engagement practices. And the first step in that process was to create an inventory. So we created a survey and we asked our staff, what kinds of engagement practices are you engaging on right now? And sort of like some of the limitations, are they statutorily prescribed? Do you have any leeway? You know, just assessing practices, whether they work, they don't work. Areas of proficiency. One area where our agency identified across the board in the survey that we analyzed is that our staff have an incredible level.
Is Carla frozen for all of you?
Yes, I know she's been
Shoot.
having connectivity issues at the agency. I did have 3 brief points, if that helps us stall until Carla
Sure.
is with us again.
I'll send her
Sure.
a quick message while you're talking.
Great.
Okay.
So number one, I think I have a commitment from my co-professor for environmental policy in the Rubenstein School to fill out your all's feedback form, and like take a master plan from a region and do their best to fill out a form, because that's sometimes where I start, just with, what if someone's first language isn't English? What if this is intimidating to them? What if they don't have a computer? You know, what are all the ways that this form is useful and really intimidating, or needs some work, or needs an alternative path for people to be heard. So I will be happy to share that feedback. Carla, I was just making 3 points while you got back in. And my second, and I wrote them down because 2, this is something we struggle with, obviously, in every aspect of government. And one of my mentors, even if we didn't get to talk very often, was Raul Grijalva, the member of Congress who wrote the first Environmental Justice Act in the United States, who passed away, unfortunately, a couple of years ago. And when I was talking to his staff about having him speak to the Natural Resources Committee in the Senate about the Environmental Justice Bill, I said, it could be you and it could be Peter Welch, and we'll get all these fancy people to speak to our committee and encourage them to pass the Environmental Justice Bill. And his staff, not him, but his staff said, the congressman always likes to start by hearing from 3 voices of people who are not often heard in these spaces. It's something you can do in every meeting. Who's the least heard person in the room, who's not in the room, who's an outlier in their feedback on something, and just to really make sure they feel invited, intentionally invited into the conversation. And finally, some of you were planners in another life and you worked in municipal government. My favorite story to tell is when I was in charge for the city of Burlington of planning the Americans with Disabilities Act 25th anniversary celebration. And I wanted it to be so perfect and for everyone to have the ability to participate on North Beach, which had become newly accessible, but everything could be inaccessible. So I agonized over it and I agonized over it. And in passing, I must have said to one of the Parks and Rec staff, who's like, has no fancy title, was just asked to help me make sure things were set up properly. And I must have in passing said to him, I wonder how people in wheelchairs are going to be able to access the picnic tables. It's really hard. And next time I came back a couple weeks later, he said, I just cut off the end of some of the picnic benches so that people could sit there in a wheelchair. A permanent change to the benches at Parks and Rec that he may or may not have gotten permission for, but he just did the damn thing, and sometimes that's what we have to do, is however imperfect it is, we just have to do it and, beg for forgiveness rather than ask for permission. And I think about that man all the time when I'm having trouble figuring out, where to start with these efforts.
Thank you, Senator. We're a little 6 minutes over time. We started a little bit late, and I would like to see this as the beginning of a conversation. And sorry, I don't know if that is being heard behind me, but there's a dog barking.
No.
So
Hearing it, Jana, it's okay.
oh, good. Oh, brother. Hold on just a
Well, I'm actually going to take this opportunity to finish what I was saying earlier. And is we did this inventory, Alex, and we learned a lot regarding level of comfort from our staff in engaging certain communities. And so we are dedicating portions of our community engagement plan development to ensuring that our staff increase that level of comfort. And so bottom line is there's this guidance document that the subgroup for the EJ law is putting together. It includes permitting, it includes rulemaking, and it has a bunch of other best practices and recommendations to the covered agencies that they should consider when putting together their plans. And at ANR, we are there alongside you all. We are looking to improve our systems, create more efficiencies. Our staff, as you probably are as well, are overworked, under-resourced, and so it is our job to make this work accessible to them. And so that's the vision that we have for our plan, is making sure that we provide staff what they need to do what they want to do, which is improve the practices that are already taking place at the agency. Thank you. Thank
Thank you very much, both of you, for being here. And And Senator, just so you know, the comment form for the regional plans, originally that was, we thought they had to use our form, and then we realized how impossible that form was for anyone who had just not very many comments. And we changed our guidelines to allow just, a written comment from, in an email or whatever from anybody. So, but just so you know that before you
I'll still
try
make
to
my
use that
students
form.
fill out the onerous form, and then I'll
Yeah.
tell them that
Yeah.
you've allowed for
But
that change.
yeah. So we've been going for nearly almost 3 hours, and I think I need to suggest that we take a brief break. Catherine, do you have the break notice? And I would say, do you think 5 or 10 minutes, board members? 5?
That's good for
Okay.
me.
Okay, so we will be back at 2:55. Thank you so much, Carla and Keisha, for being with us today.
Reach
Sarah?
out, please, if you have any questions. Bye.
I was just going to ask if our speakers are coming back or if we're continuing on to the next agenda item when we
Oh,
come
I
back.
think we're going to move on to the next agenda item.
So I'll just state that I will stay off camera for that next agenda item, as I'm not one of the board designees, but I will be here and
yeah.
ready to be pulled back in. So, and
Okay,
I
great.
just want to thank our
Thanks.
speakers too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. And so thank you, Catherine. We'll be right back. Okay, 3 of us are back. Catherine, you can take the notice down. Kirsten's back. And is Sarah, are you with us?
Sarah won't be joining us for this next one
Oh, that's
because
right.
she's not participating.
Yes, she did say that. Thank you. Thank you, Alex. So we are continuing the discussion of the Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission pre-application response. Do we have anyone from Two Rivers with us? Just checking. Doesn't look like it, interestingly. Okay. And I would like to share screen. That is okay. And we started our discussion last week on this, and I revised this subsequent according to, to sort of reflect board discussion at that meeting. So I have, you'll see new information in red since it was last posted on our website. Some of this is just including the statutory provisions that we are working under. So all of this is just quotation of statute. And so this this is the section on working lands in particular, or no, we had issues about whether lower income senior and rural communities in particular were adequately involved in some of these policies. So we are determining that we need more information, and we also decided last week to make reference to other sections of the response that would address similar issues. So I have done that here. And board members, if you have particular issues with some of the revisions, just stop me along the way. I'm going to go quickly through this to try to get down to where we left off last time, if that's okay. It is.
Yep.
Okay. So we got through, I think, housing. We got through the goals. We were in the elements.
Yeah, that's where I
and-
needed your help, Janet. I couldn't quite remember which element we ended
Yeah, I
on.
think it was housing. I should have double checked before we started. Okay, so we got through conformance. Yeah, we talked about that. And transportation, utility. We talked about transportation. I think we were we talked about this too, didn't we? The housing, homes in the region, or maybe this is right where we were. But we decided the board is unable to determine whether the draft meets this requirement. And some of the reasons were around mandatory policies. We moved these up. Yeah, we did talk about this. We moved those up from advisory to sort of required more information, or change them from advisory. But I did have a question here, Alex. This is from a comment that you provided, and I'm not sure exactly what you meant by this phrase or this sentence. Does that look like an important piece of that particular request for more information to you?
What I was trying to get at is that it's problematic for a new Act 250 project that would be large enough to trigger new jurisdiction. But this policy could be even more problematic for small projects that would not normally trigger Act 250 jurisdiction, but are subject to an existing Act 250 permit. And therefore, for a simple permit amendment, to add another house or two, might trigger this policy and yeah, so that's what it's trying to say.
I see. Brooke,
I'm not-
go ahead.
Not sure it's necessary, that sentence.
Brooke,
Yeah, I'm somewhat concerned about the sole focus about this mandatory provision only on Act 250. My concerns about it were broader in the sense of consistency that's required between regional and town plans and the trickle down effect in terms of the use of this kind of setting of a standard in a regional plan, which I don't think is the kind of appropriate place for that specific a policy, and that the impact ultimately on a town plan that is, reviewed by the regional planners for its consistency, and then the supremacy of that law in terms of its guidance over ordinances. So I just wanted to be clear about, this wasn't just about somebody who owns property and wants to subdivide for their children, and it has broader implications other than to use this
Right.
kind of this kind of language in terms of outside the regulatory impacts of Act 250.
yep. Kirsten,
Sorry, go ahead.
So, I'll just reflect a little bit on what Alex contributed insofar as problems for Act 250 jurisdictional housing projects that would trigger on their own, and also those that may encompass a smaller number of units located on tracts already under Act 250 jurisdiction. I actually think that there may be some confusion around that, and that it appears that maybe there's an assumption that it's only those default original jurisdictional thresholds that would trigger Act 250, and for which this apparent standard would apply. And regardless, I see it as problematic, and for the same reasons that you do, Alex. Like it would greatly disadvantage, construction of housing units in typically more rural locations or anywhere beyond a paved road. And I think I said this at the last meeting, I see that as problematic. I also, in terms of what Brooke just said, I was going to say something similar, but I also want to mention, I know we're on the very home stretch of the deadline for providing this pre-application response, but I think these issues are so fundamental and important that we need to take the time we need to make sure that it's very carefully explained in our response what those parameters are. And I think if we need to ask the RPC for, say, a 1-week extension, I would support that. I think it's important that we get this right. I'm not saying we're not, but as I mentioned last week, I said I look forward to a conversation after we hear from our attorneys. That's still in progress. So I think this updated wording is sort of heading in the right direction, but I'm not sure it's quite there.
I'll just add that we discuss the mandatory policy in a general manner in their sections, and I could do more cross-referencing and talking about, exactly what Brooke just described as, that the mandatory policies in general seem to be going beyond what the regional plan should do, and maybe it needs to be, a more of an analysis of whether it's compatible with municipal plans. So we hit on this in other areas too. So, but I can do some more cross-referencing. Alex.
Yeah, I was going to say that towards the beginning of the response, we talk about conformance with general goals, and it's in that section that we indicate that there are some issues with regard to how substantial regional impact is defined, what those triggers are. And there you added some language about mandatory language in the plan and whether that reflects the majority of the municipalities' plans and how that will help serve to guide municipalities. I think that's the spot to hit on what Brooke is talking about. So that's on page 3 and 4 of the draft response. So maybe a little bit more language there, Janet. But I would also say, Brooke, to your point, several of these policies are specific to Act 250 projects. And I don't know to what extent any of the municipal plans in this region make a similar sort of reference with regard to development. In other words, being very specific about only development within the Act 250 world. So my sense was that I also heard the concern expressed by, I think it was Gwen Zakoff, who was concerned in her comments to us that a municipal plan trying to get confirmed by the Regional Planning Commission may be held hostage by mandatory provisions of the regional plan that the municipal plan is not deemed to be in conformance with. And I don't see these Act 250 specific policies as being a problem in that regard, because they're not general policies with regard to, for example, no development on gravel roads. They are specific to Act 250 development on gravel roads. And I doubt that the municipal plans go there in the same way. But I do agree with you that the larger concern outside of these particular Act 250 specific policies is of concern. And I think that section I referenced on page 3 and 4 is the place Janet could flesh that out a little bit more.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I don't see a difference in terms of, okay, if it's general versus Act 250. If a town does not believe that that's appropriate for that town, and they enact a town plan that has a conflicting provision, where does that leave them for the determination of whether or not they're compliant with the regional plan? I mean, the bottom line is I don't necessarily see this as appropriate for a regional impact kind of policy. So that's where I end up with it, because then whether it's being held hostage in a town plan for a general provision of all housing or just Act 250 projects, it does not appear from the community engagement that we have received in our Act 250 board emails, and what I see on Facebook in terms of Rural Vermont Rising. I don't see that as being a policy that is reflective of our citizenry in this region.
Right, and I think that goes to the outreach conversation that we had earlier in this response. And, if you don't have the support of your member municipalities and your citizenry, then these probably aren't appropriate in the plan. And we can't say that you have done sufficient outreach if we are getting all this feedback. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. But I let me just say, I would agree with Kirsten. This, we have so many things going on. I spent the weekend on Rutland's final decision and would really appreciate an extra week to be able to fully comprehend and make sure that we are expressing all of our concerns in the pre-application response letter. I think it's
Okay,
due
let's
next
keep-
Monday, I think is the
Yeah.
date.
Yeah. Let's keep moving though. So, nothing for economic development, but advisory recommendations based on feedback I got from board members. And in terms of flood resilience, there are no issues there. A couple of advisory recommendations. Future land use. So let's hop right in. Oh, Kirsten, go ahead.
So just a general word format, and perhaps I'm not remembering our latest, greatest wording, but I noticed above in a section where you indicated that the element or goal did not appear to have been met, and you said requested revision. I just take a look at if we have
Oh, it's
shifted
required.
to required revision.
Yeah, it
like,
should be required.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll
thank you.
fix that.
You'll
thanks
check
for
all those.
noticing that. Yeah. Out of pen. Just want to make a note to do that. Thanks, Kirsten. So let's go to the future land use. It's not loading. Remind me, Kirsten. So the future land use element is certainly in the plan. But I think the way that I've suggested we respond is to say that it appears to meet the requirement. However, insofar as individual mapped FLUA are described below as appearing not to comply, those mapped elements of the regional future land use map will require revision in line with the guidance provided by the board, unless TRORC provides additional information demonstrating compliance. So, so then a couple of advisory, and then downtown centers. They are proposed in Randolph and White River Junction, and I didn't see any board members had any issues with those, and they appear to comply. One recommendation there. So, and this was yeah, just an advisory. So village centers, I summarized the village centers that are proposed and looked at them and see that 49 of 63 of them appear to meet statutory standards, and then evaluated or more specifically gave feedback on 14 that appear to have some issues. So do board members want to go through those? Did you get a chance to look at this over the weekend or on Friday?
I did review it just against the comments I had provided you, and it seems like you incorporated my concerns about various village centers with one exception. So it's not on the list. That's the only one I wanted to raise. But if you want to walk down the list, or if others want to, that's fine with me too.
I'd rather not unless board members need to discuss, because we'll never get through this. So, Alex, what needs to be added?
Potentially, based on what the rest of you think, it's a village center in Rochester.
Oh, is it village area though? Or is it center? I remember that.
Yeah, my notes have it as the
Okay.
Halkville Village Center. I think there are
Okay.
multiple village centers in Rochester.
Yeah.
But
there are.
it would probably bear looking at the map and figuring it out.
Oh, okay. I was thinking of this one. Explain the northwesterly extension on the west side. So this one is Talkville?
Talkville was the one that I had made a
Okay.
comment on. Yeah.
I will revisit that comment, but do you want to give it now?
Sure, yeah. So to the extent that folks know where Talkville is, it's one of the village centers in Rochester. Each of these village centers has a distinct name in our mapping. If you click on the dark pink, it'll tell you what the name of it is. And so one of them is the Rochester Village Center, and the other is the Talkville Village Center. And my comment was simply similar to some of these other comments that I need more information to determine that it is actually a center for civic and commercial activity in the community. It doesn't necessarily jump out at me as being that. So maybe it is, but either remap it or give more information to make that case.
Okay, thanks, Alex. I will get that in there.
For the record, the Rochester Village Center is the legacy one, and Talkville is to the south of it. And it's a new village center. It's not a legacy village center, which I tend to scrutinize a little, maybe a little more so than the legacy areas.
Okay. Brooke,
Can you go over Brookfield? I'm not sure that I followed what you were saying
Okay.
on that one.
Brookfield Center, Village Center. This is a proposed new village center. It's basically the same thing that Alex just said. It's a new center, and it's not clear that it has an economic activity and civic assets to demonstrate that it meets the standard for village center.
So you're talking about not the one at Pond Village, but the one where the elementary school is, right?
I'd have to look at the map.
It's the one to the
I can't-
south.
To the south, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But right in the center of that's the elementary school, which is because you
Okay,
also
so it does have a civic asset in that sense.
yeah, and it just didn't, but then you mentioned East Brookfield being a hamlet, which that's neither the north or the south, the Pond Village or the elementary school central one. So I was just
I think-
confused as to what you were saying.
Yeah, I think this is Alex's comment, and I think what he's saying, and maybe I should just let Alex say it, is that he's confused as to why they're proposing a village center here, because it doesn't look much different from East Brookfield, which they're not proposing to be a center. It's just a hamlet. Alex?
Yeah, you nailed it, Jana, and I'm going to share my screen, so I'm going to bump you off for just a
Great.
moment, just to show the map.
Yeah.
That way, because I'm pretty sure Brooke knows where all this stuff is, but there maybe the rest of us, including myself, less familiar. So this is the future land use map with the legacy village center here next to the pond, as Brooke mentioned, and the new village center, which is a bit larger, to the south. And when I zoom in on it and I go to Google Maps, because I like to go back and forth, this is Brookfield Center. And here is the elementary school that Brooke was, I believe, that Brooke was talking about. I assume it's next to the Orange Southwest School District building and the baseball field.
Well, it is the Orange Southwest School District building. That is
Right.
the elementary school. Yeah.
That's
And
what I
and the
assumed,
ball
yep.
field, yep.
And the ball field, yep.
Yeah.
But other than that, when I look at what is there, I see crossroads and very little else. So it just, again, if the community is looking to grow in this area, that as a new center, okay, maybe some more information would help demonstrate that, not unlike the conversations we were having, or some of us were having with another region and their new town center. But that's why I raised the question. It just, aside from the school, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot going on there.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay.
Happy to be overruled, by the way, Brooke, if you're more familiar with the region and say that, no, that's a thriving little center with commercial activity and the like, please say so.
Well, it is a center of the town. The elementary school is a very central location for many civic activities outside of just the school itself. I do notice that the boundaries do stop in the south, I think before the church that is just a little bit farther south. In terms of economic activity, I'm not sure that there is commercial anything there, but the school itself is such a focal point for Brookfield, in addition to its Pond Village area, of course, where the floating bridge is, that it did not give me any pause for concern, but we can certainly have the regional planners respond so that they can indicate anything that I'm not thinking of.
Okay. So that's village centers. Anything else on village centers, board members?
No, but do you want to continue sharing the document?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I forgot Alex took it over. Okay, so, planned growth areas, 2 are proposed, I believe. They are in Randolph and White River Junction around the downtowns. 3, I'm sorry. And the one in Bradford, I thought had an issue. So although it, I guess I couldn't understand why, if it had, what's the difference between that and what they're showing for village area? So do you all have any issues with it? And do you want to show it on screen maybe, Alex?
Sure.
Thanks.
There it is with the village center in dark purple. The legacy portion of that village center in orange striping, the planned growth areas to the south along Route 5. And
And
then,
can you show water sewer too?
yeah, I was just gonna bring that up.
Oh, thanks.
So there's sewer. At
Yeah.
least as far as our statewide database is concerned. And water is the yellow dots. So, it
Right.
makes it look like the water and sewer service area is somewhat smaller than what they're proposing and may not cover the planned growth area, which would be problematic from a statutory standpoint. But as we know, a lot of the statewide data is not complete. So more
Right.
information might help answer that.
The other issue, though, is it seemed somewhat disconnected along Route 5. And I think I took a little Google Street View ride down there and just didn't see that it seemed connected. And
Did we talk about this did we go through this on the site visit? I have this memory that area along Route 5 is very different from the village area just to the west of it, that there's a topographic feature there, which I thought was why they had not mapped planned growth area to the west of Route 5, and that it was mostly, right along and to the east of Route 5. But
if we did, I don't recall being,
You don't remember?
it
Okay.
wasn't on our itinerary to go through Bradford, I don't think.
Yeah, so perhaps that was part of a virtual tour, or it's just a figment of my imagination because we've been to so many towns that start with B. Yeah.
Yeah, so in any case, I had concerns about that planned growth area. And Kirsten, go ahead.
I don't have specific concerns, but I'm happy to, it's okay to ask them to provide a little bit more information in support of how it qualifies as a PGA.
Yes. And that's the way this is worded, so, yeah. Okay, let's move on.
I'll stop
I
sharing the
will
map so
share
you
again.
can.
Okay, so next is village areas. There are 15 village areas. And 4 of them had some identified issues. And those were in Newbury, Norwich, Randolph, and Thetford. I'm sorry, there's a dog barking. I hope you can't hear that. So Newbury, long linear portions to the north and south along Route 5. But it's very distant from the center along State Highway, beyond Lockhart. So that was the issue expressed for Newbury. Norwich, 3 different issues. The river corridor on the northwest, the Turnpike Road area was being distant from the village center. And finally, the area as we walked that Hawk Pine Road neighborhood above the village center, where there's, right next to Cliff Street, that seemed to be separated from the village center in a way that made it not connected. Randolph. So the Randolph village area, not the Randolph Center village area. Provide additional information as to why that is proposed instead of mapping it as part of the PPA. And Thetford, easterly village area that extends to Interstate 89. It looks rural in the planned future land use map. It's distant, so what's the argument for putting it in village area? Is that okay with you all?
Can I just add a comment?
Kirsten?
Yeah, so I just want to mention for my part, item 3 concerning the Norwich Village area. I wasn't really myself concerned about the parent disconnect because I could see that there was a roadway connectivity that wasn't too far away. And it seemed like the kind of setting too, where over time people may create, trail connectivity, other kinds of pedestrian connectivity of the type that you see in places, in areas, for instance, in Montpelier, where there's also some very steep slope areas that bring together different parts of the community. So I didn't think that, like, I'm okay with asking for more information, but I didn't see that as problematic because of the available road connectivity.
Yeah, the road though was quite
That was
far
else-
away.
Yeah, well,
It was
a little
quite
bit.
north of
A
the
little bit.
center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which Kirsten, just so I'm clear, of the 3 items in Norwich that Janet has highlighted in her response, which of the 3 are you referring to as not really seeing a problem with?
Item 3.
Yeah, Janet, I'm on the same page with Kirsten. I didn't think that was an issue, even though we did the site visit and looked up the cliff. Like, what was up there seemed like it wasn't far enough away through the road network. So I would recommend.
can you just show it quickly on the
Oh, yeah.
screen?
Absolutely. Give me just a moment to
Thanks.
get to Norwich. Sorry, taking me a moment to get my bearings here on the map.
Alex is getting his bearings, Brooke and Kirsten. I think it's clear that we're not gonna get through this, in less than 10 minutes. And I will send a request for more time to the regional commission. Should the four of us decide that we should do that.
So here's Norwich. I'll zoom in. We're talking about the village area and different pieces of it. And
Right, and so actually, can you scoot, show a little bit more of the northern section of the village area? Yeah, scoot. So that, here you have to go all the way, it seems pretty far to me, but what's our scale there? That 1,000 feet is about an inch. That's far. And that's a really steep hill. I don't think there's gonna be a short connection.
I remember the staff thought there was a trail and we tried to locate it during our site visit and couldn't put our eyes on it.
Mhm.
But I guess my question, Janet, is I see what you're saying. And yeah, I guess to the extent that these other areas are very disparate from the village center, perhaps
Hmm.
this one is too, due to the circuitous way you'd
Yeah.
have to get there.
Yeah, so more information, okay, with people? Brooke? Brooke?
You're on mute.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. It's not on that. I just wanted to mention something on Randolph.
Oh, okay.
So I don't want to
Okay.
interrupt.
Well, you're okay with asking for more information is the question. Yes. Yes?
Yeah, I am too,
Okay.
so it's fine to
Okay.
leave it.
Okay, Randolph, go ahead, Brooke.
Yeah, you had some concern, I think, about the extension in the east, up Route 66 towards the interstate. And that to me, I think by the map, there may be the perception that it goes almost all the way to the interstate, but it really is quite far away from that. And it really just encompasses, there is an elderly housing, assisted living and nursing home at the corner of Windover Road, which is sort of a cutoff to get down to the high school. And that area is also across, a little bit farther down is across from the golf course. So to me, that really did not seem like it was an unusual extension finger or anything to the east. It really is very well traveled by particularly bicycle. There
Okay.
are folks who do walk that area as well.
Alex, sorry, can you show that quickly?
Yep.
On screen so that we can illustrate what Brooke just described.
Yeah, over on the right-hand side of the screen where you see Route 66 with Sunset Hill Road. That's a little cutoff that's parallel that has quite a bit of housing there. But that portion that then goes up to all the way to Windover Road, that corner right there on the northeast corner, that is the nursing home property. And I believe that they have cleared behind it for other housing that may be going in there.
So
Um,
that's planned growth area. I think this
Mhm.
comment was on the village area on the western side of the village center
Oh,
or of the
okay.
downtown.
Oh,
Sorry.
I thought you were talking about going up to the
No, it's
interstate.
this. It's not my cursor. It's the one south of the river, west of the downtown.
Okay, hold on a minute. Oh, okay, yeah.
Why isn't it just planned growth? What's different about it that makes it village area?
Yeah, we can ask them that question.
Okay.
It's, yeah, I
Is
don't
that
know
a,
why the,
is that
why the
a trailer park
distinction.
at the edge?
Looks
Out at
like,
Thayer, yeah,
Yeah,
Thayer Brook Road,
yeah.
yeah.
And is there any difference in benefits that accrue between village area and planned growth area? And, if so, why not include that as planned growth area? Is there a sewer water problem, Alex? Do you know? Can you put that up?
I can try to put that up. Does not appear to be. It looks like
Right.
sewer comes right out to, and at least the tail end of that village area is at least adjacent to it, seems within the realm
Yeah.
of close enough.
Okay. Okay. So you're okay with asking for more information on that? Okay. All right. Thank you, Alex. Let's go on to transition infill. I highlighted this from statute. The intent of this land use category is to transform these areas into higher density mixed use settlements or residential neighborhoods through infill and redevelopment or new development. And my concern is that that's not that Two Rivers describes these in a different way. And it suggests that they should be reserved, at least to some degree, for land intensive uses. And I don't think that was what was meant for transition infill.
Yeah, I have I guess I'd like, might be good to see how they describe it in the plan, but I have that same impression from other regions that if it's land intensive from a commercial industrial standpoint, then it probably is an enterprise area, not
Yeah.
necessarily automatically a transition infill, unless the community is in fact planning to transition that land intensive use into a more mixed use, less sprawly,
Right. But
area.
what the Two Rivers plan says is land intensive uses should be in the transition infill. Larger retail and such, it sounds like, is what they mean. Something that might not be appropriate for enterprise, but I think it's a misconception to suggest that, I don't know. What do you all think?
I think haven't given this a lot of thought, Janet, but I think you're right in terms of citing, like pointing out what the statute says and conceptually, like
Mhm. Right.
Yes, but we're in the future land use section of our compliance check. And so, yeah, that definition matters and we should call it out if it's off. But I also think we need to look at the map and make some determination over whether there are wide scale issues with how transition infill is being mapped, or perhaps they have a little bit of the wrong definition in the plan, but the mapping is still on point.
Right.
So it
Right.
requires a little of
I
both.
didn't have a problem with the mapping. It was just this policy
Okay.
direction. Do you want me to clarify that? That the mapping
Um,
looks okay?
Well, I should just read what you wrote and then a little bit harder. You say that only 2 of the proposed transition infill areas clearly appear to meet the statutory standards.
Right.
And the eligibility of the remaining 12 is uncertain because the status of public water or sewer services
Oh,
is
that
not
too. I
indicated.
forgot about that. Yeah,
So I think, I do think it would make sense to maybe add another sentence right at the beginning of the highlighting that's where you say the draft regional plan policies for transition infill do not appear to reflect the statutory description for the transition infill areas. And then maybe a second sentence that says, many of the actual mapped areas may be appropriate, subject to the concerns, noted below, which has to do with water and sewer service and that sort of thing. Just to qualify it a little bit,
you mean up above, I see.
yeah, I would hate for them to think, oh, like we have to turn off all the transition infill mapped areas and start from scratch, when maybe what they really need to do is update their policy statement and tinker with, give us more information about public water and sewer service to those, the areas as mapped. Because, just to be cheeky about it, I don't think they blew it on the mapping. Like, I think
Right.
many of the transition infill areas are appropriately mapped,
Right.
even if the description in the plan is a little off.
Right, I agree. It's just that we need information about water sewer plans for them. Kirsten,
Yeah, and thinking about this a little bit more, I mean, I do think that there are some land consumptive types of commercial uses that can over time be replaced with things that would align with the core settlement land uses. I'm thinking of, for instance, commercial business that is like a retail base for agricultural equipment, where they have open land retained as part of the business to demonstrate that equipment, and it is thereby, somewhat land consumptive to have this acreage alongside the retail business. But maybe over time, as land values change and the pattern of development changes, it transitions to something else. I don't know. I guess I
yeah,
feel like
that's fine, Kirsten. That's not what I'm suggesting is a problem. What I'm suggesting as a problem is their policy statement that transition infill should be for land consumptive uses. If there's land consumptive use there now and they foresee it as transitioning into something else as described in statute, that's fine. It's not whether there's a land consumptive use there now, it's that their policy statement seems to suggest that that's what those
that
areas
could belong
should
there.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that there may be some type of businesses that wouldn't conflict with the eventual goal of having that transition into an extension of the core settlement area. Like
Yeah,
it's
Janet, I
yeah.
agree with Kirsten. I think that was their intent.
Yeah.
Because if you read that section of the plan, it definitely has the policy statement that you're calling out. But in the text above that, on the same page, it does talk about these are areas in the process of becoming more dense, mixed commercial,
Right.
residential areas. So I think
it's a little, I think they need to work on some nuances there. Because it's conflicting information. It's confusing.
Yeah, and honestly, I think they're trying to say if you have a land consumptive area, it could be in a transition infill. It's appropriate there. And what you're saying is, but only if the overall intent is to transition it over time. And so I think both can be true. But I do look at some of the examples they give and I wonder how exactly is a lumber yard going to transition into, mixed use, a mixed use area. Like lumber yards they're not doing that. And if they're going to continue to exist, that you don't locate high density residential next to lumber yards at least in my experience. So anyway,
Okay, okay to move on? Yeah. All right, resource-based recreation. I didn't get any concerns from board members on these. There's a few recommendations. They only have 3, I think, or is it 4? But
yeah,
any
I was fine with
concerns?
that.
Okay.
No,
Hamlets, no concerns, though. It was really, really hard to find the hamlets on the map because they don't use a point layer for the hamlets, but also they have a hamlet subsection and they have hamlet policies. It seems like it would be helpful if they would name them so that people knew where you were talking about. So those are the advisory recommendations I had for that. Okay, rural general. So again, not a problem with the mapping, a problem with the policies. And insofar as there are mandatory policies expressed that are at odds with statutory goals or other policies within the plan, the board requests additional information. The issue of conflicting with member municipality zoning allowances, Brooke, also comes up here. So I guess this could be cross-referenced with some of those others. But how do you feel about these 3? Oh, you know what, Kirsten, since maybe what I should do is put requested information or required revisions instead of trying to combine it. Is that what you were noticing? Because we're sort of combining these in a lot of the.
Yeah, there's just one place above you'll see that says.
Okay, I'll look for that.
Appears that it doesn't meet the standard, and then it says requested revision.
Okay,
Requested
I'll
revisions,
find
but
it.
it's-
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
yeah, so I have a little bit of discomfort with this approach, similar to what I was saying before, because I'm not sure that the mapping is off. It
Right.
is the policies. I'm willing to relent on that as long as the required revisions or requested informations in yellow are mentioned in either an element or a goal where they also come into conflict with that element or goal, as opposed to just in the future land use mapping section. Because I think these really also need to be tied to like the housing element, the prohibition on new multi-unit buildings with 6 or more dwellings. Like that's a housing issue. It's not just a
Right.
future land use mapping issue.
Right, and that's why I
So-
refer to other key policies in the plan, but they, unlike a lot of other, I mean, this was part of their land use element. These
Yeah, I
policies are
understand.
part of their land use element. So it would be really hard to, parse them all out and put them in the places where you think they maybe should go, Alex.
You're right, Janet. That's a good point.
So-
Maybe just the cross-referencing that you're talking about
Yeah,
in those goals and elements, just in the housing element, refer to additional issues highlighted in the future land use element in element number 12, just so it brings the reader to say like, hey, the board said they had issues with this. I don't see that policy listed in the housing section. Where is it? Oh, it's in the future land use section under rural general.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Kirsten.
Yeah, just a quick comment. This may also have a nexus to some potential misunderstanding about applicability of Act 250 jurisdiction. 6 or more lots in towns without zoning and subdivision bylaws triggers Act 250. And then in addition, there's a standard for, dwelling units. If you're outside of the centers or separate apart from the interim housing exemptions, it's 10 or more units within 5 miles, 5 years. So I think maybe someone thought 6 units would necessarily be a threshold whereby you're into Act 250, but that's not necessarily the case. So I
Kirsten, can
just,
you send me an email with that
sure.
observation so that I can make sure it's expressed here?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that it's
Yeah.
it's understood insofar as the parameters of this plan too.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
Yeah.
just
Yeah, I
remember,
will.
in this particular policy statement, policy 3 on page 3-12 doesn't refer to Act 250, whereas many other policy statements do specifically refer. This is a more general statement that I think
Yes.
true.
Brooks' concern about like this
Concern
could
about,
hamstring
yeah,
a town
yeah.
plan. That's a very real concern with this one, in my mind, because it's not just Act 250.
I
Right.
agree, Alex. I was just commenting that perhaps there's some related
Confusion.
origin.
Okay, Brooke, go ahead.
Yeah, I do agree with this, but I also want to make the point that we have been constantly faced with questions about, some of these flu areas like rural general, and we've heard a lot of people concerned about it, and it's like, oh, don't worry about it, it's not regulatory, and people are like, yeah, but what does it mean for the future? Could it become so if I'm designated whatever the flu area that is not in the category of receiving benefits, or
Right.
that kind of thing. And this is the exact opposite of the representations, at least as the statute sits today, and the fact that these are not to be regulatory. So that's sort of the backdrop that I continue to be concerned about, is that the statute is being, or these flu areas are being used in a way that are not intended in terms of mandatory language. So I appreciate
Yeah.
your comments on that regard.
Yeah. Okay, couple of advisory recommendations. Though I don't want to say okay in caps. Rural ag and forestry. Again, mapping looks okay, but there are some policies that seem problematic. So similarly, shoot, lost my earbud. Do you want to discuss these in turn, or?
I think they're good. I don't have anything to add. I think you nailed it.
Okay. Brooke, in particular, the AOFB, you wanted to cross-reference to that one earlier in the response.
Absolutely. It's an issue that it should not be a top-down dictate. It needs to go through the stakeholder process and recommendations to the legislature in terms of what the LURB ultimately determines from that stakeholder process, what would be most useful and beneficial for our
Do you like
farming
this wording?
communities.
Do you like this wording, or would you like it to be different in any way to better reflect that?
Yeah, but I'm gonna have to send it to you. We don't need to
Yeah,
wordsmith
that's
it right
fine.
now.
Yeah, that'd be great if you could email it. Okay, so rural conservation. Looks like Neil just showed up.
You might want to back up a page.
I know.
We
Right there.
have to keep
We have to
going, I
move on.
think,
Yeah,
in
we
order to
do.
get through this.
So, rural conservation, so it is not clear whether all enumerated mandatory policies are supported by member municipalities and the regional public. If it's not demonstrated, eliminate these policies or revise them. So, I need to say required here.
And I appreciate, Janet, you mentioning not just the municipalities, but the citizenry as well. It's important
Yeah,
that
and
we
in
hear their
in
voice on this.
in the outreach section, I also added that. So, all right, so we got through the land use section. MP has their hand up. Who is MP?
I think that was the person who signed in as member of the public.
Hello?
Oh,
This
is that Neil
hi,
Ryan?
this is Todd Heyman in Heartland, Vermont. How are you?
Oh, it's Todd Heyman.
Yes,
Todd.
I just wanted, before you move too far off that AOFB rule, I did communicate
Yeah.
this by email, but in addition to the top-down concerns that you all have mentioned with the stakeholder process, I just wanted to point out, like, that rule or policy or whatever they want to call it is fundamentally at odds with the spirit of the statute. The spirit of the statute says municipalities shall not have targeted restrictions only on AOFBs. In other words, rules that only apply to them. And no municipality can pass a bylaw that does that. And yet now we're going to say a regional planning commission, which supposedly represents municipalities, can, through a regional plan, as opposed to a bylaw, put substantial targeted limitations on AOFB businesses. And granted, I understand a regional planning commission is technically a political subdivision of the state, but given their constituent members are municipalities, I mean, this rule, it flies in the face of the purpose of the statute. And in addition to that, I mean, the extensive amount of fighting that has occurred in the legislature with the LURB, with private people, to like have an unelected body insert a rule into a plan that no member of the legislature probably ever even contemplated would happen, that a regional planning commission would try to enact a AOFB targeted regulation. I mean, it's just so arrogantly aggressive. And so I hope that that kind of AOFB targeted regulation does not happen. I think it's pretty clear the legislature never envisioned it and would never want that. I mean, we just had that conference committee on S325, and they're sitting there discussing what kind of limitations they want to place on these businesses to avoid Act 250 jurisdiction. And nobody's contemplating the fact that other people are now going to be regulating these businesses. And so I just want to make sure that somebody says that out loud while you're all listening.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
We're gonna keep moving into the Tier 1A, Tier 1B area status request. So this regional commission has requested Tier 1B status for 7 municipalities, 6 towns and 1 village, and the village of Woodstock has not yet adopted subdivision regulations, so is not yet eligible. And then the others, many of them don't have river corridor regulations, which could be okay, but we need to make sure that only areas of infill then are included there. And it seems to me that there may be some areas that are not infill eligible. So I just called out those 3 areas in this response. Board members okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
Just need a little more information from them as to whether they're including areas that don't qualify for infill within